You know that person, right? The one who is just clearly drowning. Deadlines are piling up, they look exhausted, they're barely holding it together, and yet every time you offer to help, they turn you down. Maybe that's a friend, maybe it's a coworker, or hey, maybe it's you. Well, let's get into this, because this isn't just some random personality quirk. It's a really deep protective instinct, and we need to understand it. This quote from Psychology Simplified it absolutely hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It's that smile, that quick, I'm fine, I've got it. That's the whole show right there. It's a performance. So today, we're going to break down exactly what that performance is, where it comes from, and why it is so incredibly hard to just stop. So often, we look at this behavior and we label it as pride, maybe even arrogance. And I get it. It's easy to see why. But the real story is so much more complex and honestly a lot more compassionate. What we're actually looking at is a survival strategy, one that was learned a long, long time ago, back when needing people felt genuinely dangerous. It worked back then, but now it might be doing more harm than good. Okay, so let's start by just looking at the behavior itself. I like to call it the I'm fine performance, because that is exactly what it is. It's a role, a carefully managed public-facing character that's designed to keep everyone, including themselves, convinced of their own unbreakable self-sufficiency. And here's the thing you have to understand. This is not a passive state. It is an active, ongoing project. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to constantly manage how you're perceived, to control the story, to make sure nobody sees any of the cracks in the armor. Think about it. The person who truly doesn't need help doesn't have to spend any energy proving it. The person who refuses help is burning fuel 24/7 just to keep that facade up. All right, so that's the what, but to really get the why, we have to go way back. This isn't a choice someone makes as an adult. It's more like a program that started running in childhood. It is a survival strategy with some incredibly deep roots. The core idea here comes from psychologist John Bowlby's work on attachment theory. He came up with this concept of internal working models. Just think of them as these mental blueprints for how relationships work. They get built from our very first interactions with our parents or caregivers. And these templates, they just run silently in the background of our adult lives, shaping what we expect from other people, and here's the crucial part, telling us whether our own needs are even valid in the first place. This really breaks down the cold, hard logic of how this pattern gets wired in. Just picture a little kid reaching out, trying to express a need. Now, if that need is met with frustration or dismissal, or maybe just nothing, their little nervous system, which is an expert pattern detector, learns a brutal lesson. Okay, needing people leads to disappointment and pain. So what's the logical move? Stop needing people. Become the one person who can handle everything all by yourself. And this brings us to what one source calls the disappointment equation. It's like this subconscious cost-benefit analysis that just runs on autopilot. The potential emotional cost of asking, the shame, the rejection, the feeling of being a burden, it feels way, way worse than the physical cost of just doing it all yourself. For a kid who is let down over and over again, pure exhaustion is simply the cheaper, safer bet. Now, this isn't just a psychological pattern. It has a real physical component. It gets literally hardwired into our brain's alarm system. Those early experiences actually shape our neurobiology, creating an alarm that is basically stuck on high alert. According to trauma experts, when your childhood environment is chronically neglectful or even threatening, it keeps the limbic system, your emotional brain, in a state of constant activation. And specifically, the amygdala, which is like the brain's tiny fire alarm, gets stuck in the on position. It learns to see vulnerability and neediness as a 5-alarm fire, a life-threatening emergency. And this image, it just perfectly illustrates the ultimate dilemma. See, children are biologically wired to run to their caregivers for comfort when they're scared. But what happens when the caregiver is also the source of the fear? Well, you've got an impossible situation that researchers call disorganized attachment. The drive to get close and the drive to run away get triggered at the exact same time, and the whole system just short circuits. Okay, so we've got a childhood strategy, we've got a hyper-alert brain. How does all this programming actually play out in adult life? Well, it turns out the price for this fierce self-reliance is incredibly high. It affects our perception of others, it shapes our relationships, and it can even stop us from seeking professional help when we really need it. Now get this. Here's a pretty startling statistic from a 2008 study by Flynn and Lake. It turns out we dramatically underestimate how willing other people are to help us. like often by as much as 50%. Our internal blueprint tells us that asking for help is this huge burden, but reality check, people are often way more willing to help than we believe. We're all operating on faulty data. This dynamic can create a really big problem in our relationships. For the person who just can't ask for help, giving feels safe, right? It puts them in a position of power, of control. But receiving feels terrifyingly vulnerable. So over time, this creates this invisible, lopsided ledger where one person does all the giving and they start to feel unseen, resentful, but they can't even say why because they can't bring themselves to ask for anything in return. And you can see how this plays out in a really high-stakes environment. A 2022 study on U.S. soldiers found a direct link between their attachment style and whether they'd seek help for their mental health. And just look at the data. Soldiers with that avoidance style were way more resistant to getting help. And the stigma around it had a huge impact, especially when it came to asking for help from their own team. It just goes to show how this early programming can have real life or death consequences. Okay, so we've kind of diagnosed the problem pretty thoroughly, but here's the most important question. Can this pattern actually change? And the answer is yes, absolutely. But it's not about flipping a switch. It's about building a new bridge, a bridge from that isolated island of self-reliance over to the mainland of connection. I absolutely love this quote. It is so important to honor this strategy, that strength, that incredible competence. It's real. It helped you survive. It got you to where you are today. But it was never, ever meant to be a permanent home. It was always meant to be a bridge just to get you through a really difficult time. The work now is learning how to walk across it. And here is the single most important takeaway for anyone who recognizes this pattern in themselves. Just understanding it, having the insight is not enough to change it. Your nervous system doesn't really care about logic. Change happens through experience. It's the slow, gradual process of taking tiny risks, asking for something small, seeing that the other person isn't burdened, and then noticing that you survived the vulnerability. Every single small experience like that is a new piece of data that slowly starts to rewrite that old, outdated code. So I want to leave you with this question. It's a question that challenges the entire foundation of the survival strategy. For anyone out there who has spent a lifetime believing that your needs are just an inconvenience to other people, the most radical and healing thing you can ask yourself is this: what if your needs are not a burden? What if they're actually a doorway to connection?